What if the retirement plan you've been quietly trusting your whole life was never actually a retirement plan? What if it was a property bet dressed up in spreadsheets and CPF projections? Here's something strange. Ask 10 people in Singapore if they're on track for retirement, and most of them will say something like, I think so. They'll mention CPF, maybe an insurance policy, maybe some savings sitting in a bank account collecting almost nothing. But ask them one more question. Does your plan assume you'll sell or downgrade your HDB one day? And the room goes quiet. Because most of them never actually decided that. It just became true. Somewhere along the way, their retirement plan absorbed their flat as an asset without anyone sitting down and saying, yes, I am comfortable selling the home I raised my kids in when I'm 72. Let's talk about how that happens and why it matters more than almost anything else in your financial plan. Picture a typical couple, late 30s, 2 kids, a 4-room HDB in Tampines, bought years ago, now worth a comfortable sum on paper. They save diligently. CPF contributions go in every month. They've got some unit trusts, a bit of stock, the usual mix. If you asked their financial planner whether they're on track, the answer would probably be yes. But here's the quiet part. That yes almost always includes their flat's value as part of the retirement number. Not explicitly. Nobody draws a red circle around the HGB and says this counts. It just gets folded into the total net worth calculation, and suddenly the numbers look healthier than they really are. The problem isn't that housing has value. Of course it does. The problem is that the plan never asked the family a much harder question. Are you actually willing to sell this, downsize, or extract equity from it when the time comes? Because if the answer is no, if this is the home you want to stay in until you're gone, then your retirement plan has a hole in it, a big one. And most people don't discover that hole until they're standing right at the edge of it. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. In Singapore, housing isn't just where you live. It's quietly become the default backup plan for retirement. CPF's Lease Buyback Scheme exists specifically so elderly households can sell part of their lease back to HDB for extra income. Right-sizing schemes exist so families can downgrade to smaller flats and pocket the difference. These programs exist because policymakers already know what many households haven't admitted to themselves, that for a huge number of Singaporeans, the flat is the retirement plan, whether they meant it to be or not. Think about that for a second. An entire national policy framework was built around the assumption that people would monetize their homes in old age. That's not a coincidence. That's a signal. So here's the big idea for today. Your retirement plan might already assume you'll sell, downgrade, or extract value from your property, even if you've never consciously agreed to it. And until you make that assumption explicit, you can't actually know if your plan works. Let's make this concrete with numbers, because vague ideas don't change behavior. Numbers do. Say a couple estimates they need $3,000 a month in retirement. Their CPF payouts, once they hit the CPF LIFE age, might cover close to half of that, depending on how much they've built up in their retirement account. The rest, call it $1,500 a month, needs to come from somewhere: savings, investments, or property. Now here's where the property bet quietly enters the picture. If that couple's spreadsheet includes sell flat, downgrade, and unlock $200,000 in proceeds as a source of that $1,500 a month, their plan looks solid. Take that assumption out, and suddenly there's a real gap, not a small one. A gap that means working longer, saving harder, or accepting a smaller lifestyle in retirement. The dangerous part is that most people never see this gap because the assumption was never written down. It was invisible. It lived quietly inside their mental math, unchallenged for 20 or 30 years. Now here's where most people completely misunderstand this. They think the risk is property prices might fall. That's a real risk, sure, but it's not the main one. The bigger risk is emotional, not financial. It's the moment, decades from now, when you're actually asked to leave the home you've lived in for half your life and you realize you don't want to. Picture an elderly couple in their 70s, healthy, settled. Every corner of their flat has a memory attached to it. Their financial plan built decades earlier assumed they'd downsize at this exact stage and use the proceeds to fund their remaining years. But when the moment actually arrives, they hesitate. This is home. Moving feels like loss, not liberation. If they don't downsize, the retirement income they were counting on simply doesn't show up. Not because the market failed them, because their younger selves made a financial decision that their older selves never agreed to. This is the real property bet, not a bet on prices, a bet on your future self being emotionally willing to do something your present self hasn't fully confronted. So what does a retirement plan look like when it stops hiding this assumption? It starts with a single honest conversation. Sit down and ask yourself directly, is my plan assuming I'll sell, downgrade, or extract equity from my property? If the answer is yes, ask a harder question. Am I actually comfortable doing that when the time arrives? Not in theory, genuinely. If the answer is no, your plan needs a new pillar. That might mean saving more aggressively outside of property. It might mean investing consistently into a portfolio built specifically to replace the income your home was quietly expected to provide. It might mean adjusting CPF top-ups, since voluntary contributions to your retirement account can boost your future CPF LIFE payouts in a way that doesn't depend on your emotional relationship with your front door. The specific numbers matter less than the honesty of the exercise. What matters is that property wealth moves from being an unspoken assumption to a deliberate choice. And here's something encouraging. Once you separate your retirement number from your property, the plan actually becomes clearer, not scarier. You stop hoping the market cooperates. You stop needing your 70-year-old self to make a difficult emotional decision under financial pressure. Instead, your retirement income comes from something you control every month, starting today, decades before the decision ever needs to be made. This is the shift that changes everything. Retirement stops being something that depends on a future sale you might not want to make. It becomes something built brick by brick from decisions available to you right now. So let's come back to the question we started with. Is your retirement actually just a property bet? For a lot of people reading this, quietly, somewhere in the numbers, the answer has been yes the whole time. Not because they're careless, because nobody ever asked them directly enough for the assumption to surface. But here's the reassuring part. Once you see the assumption, you get to choose. You can decide that yes, downsizing one day is genuinely fine with you and build your plan around that with full awareness. Or you can decide the flat stays no matter what and build an independent retirement pillar that doesn't need your home's cooperation at all. Either choice is fine. What isn't fine is drifting into retirement with a plan that was never actually yours, one built on an assumption you never agreed to, discovered only when it's too late to change course. Your payslip doesn't decide your future. Neither does your flat's valuation. Your decisions do. And the earliest, most powerful decision you can make is simply this. Stop letting your retirement plan assume things about you that you haven't decided for yourself.